The stage is small, the lights soft, and Dolly's smile is warm. But there's a weight in her voice that cuts through the crowd.
With the kiss, my coat of many colors that my mama made.
This song didn't originate in a studio or behind a microphone. It came from cold mornings on a dirt floor, from a life where poverty wasn't an abstract concept, but a constant companion. Outside the spotlight, barefoot children walked along gravel roads. Wooden shacks creaked in the wind, and every piece of clothing showed how little they had. That coat, the one the world would later celebrate, started as leftover fabric stitched together by a mother's hands. It was meant to keep a little girl warm, but instead it made her stand out. And for years, no one knew that this patchwork coat would carry heartbreak long before it carried fame.
Miss Modi told me to keep working on my paper and read it to the class next week. Can you have my coat done by then, Mama? I gotta wear it for my reading.
Behind that voice, behind the laughter and sparkle, lay a life carved out of struggle. In Locust Ridge, Tennessee, a black and white cabin stood against the Appalachian Hills. Inside it were 12 siblings struggling for space, for warmth, for attention. The surrounding hills were beautiful, but they weren't kind. After World War II, poverty ran through Appalachia like a scar across its fields and into the memories of the kids growing up there. But something strong grew out of that struggle, a quiet toughness. And without anyone realizing it at the time, those cramped rooms, that small cabin, and those unforgiving hills were shaping a voice that would one day make people laugh, cry, and feel seen all at once. That coat of many colors was born under the soft glow of a lantern by the hands of a mother who worked while the rest of the house slept. Dolly Parton's fingers moved with patience and love. The coat wasn't made from one piece of cloth. It was sewn together from many different clothes. Old dresses, worn shirts, scraps that were no longer useful on their own. Some came from family, and some were donated by people outside who had little to give but still gave something.
Brought this for your coat, Dolly. It's from my wedding dress.
Oh, thank you, Aunt Estelle.
And stitched into that coat was a story Dolly's mother told her as she worked. The story of Joseph from the Bible, the boy with the coat of many colors, hated by his brothers, but chosen for something greater.
She always would read these stories from the Bible, and she would give us examples of things. So when she had made me this little coat that I needed for real, to make me proud of it, she told me that story about Joseph and the coat of many colors from the Bible.
When the coat finally touched Dolly's small shoulders, it was pride. But pride can make a child a target. On the schoolyard, whispers turned into stares, stares into laughter, and laughter into cruelty. Children poked fun at the multicolored coat, not understanding the love stitched into every scene.
But the kids didn't think I looked a lot like Joseph, and they laughed at my coat, and it hurt my feelings. But
for a long time, Dolly didn't talk back. She didn't explain the coat or defend it. She carried it in silence. But something strange happens when a child learns to feel pain early. They either shrink or they grow a voice big enough to protect themselves. Dolly chose the voice. She began turning hurt into humor, shame into stories, and loneliness into songs. Because music was the only place where no one laughed.
I mean, ever since I was a baby, I always heard it.
Long before Nashville, long before charts and stages, she was already doing what she would do for the rest of her life. Taking what hurt her and handing it back to the world is something beautiful. Every taunt, every teasing word, every moment of doubt only fed a song that was quietly forming in her heart. That patchwork fabric, heavy with both love and ridicule, became the heartbeat of a melody that would eventually carry her from the hills of Tennessee to the world stage.
With the kiss,
Until something went terribly wrong. Until what was meant to protect her also exposed her vulnerabilities. And the coat became more than a garment. It became a story, a legend. And the world hasn't even begun to listen yet. It was 1971, and RCA's Nashville studio was humming with anticipation. though few knew what was about to be recorded would change everything. She sang not just with skill, but with memory, with pain, with every heartbeat of a little girl who had learned that love sometimes comes stitched from scraps.
Through the years I go wandering once again, back to the sea.
And then it began its quiet climb. An ascent that would shock the charts, peaking at number 4, though no number could measure the lives it would touch. It was powerful because behind every note was the heartbeat of that little girl wrapped in a patchwork coat. But what no one expected was that a song so simple, so raw, would resonate not just as a story of hardship, but as a mirror for anyone who had ever felt small, overlooked, or extraordinary in the face of struggle. And while Dolly's voice carried it into the airwaves, the coat and the story it held was just beginning to weave itself into history. The coat that once drew whispers and stares became a symbol, a heartbeat of resilience that carried Dolly from the hills of Tennessee to stages she had only dreamed of. Grammys gleamed under bright lights, Dollywood opened its gates, and everywhere she went, people saw a superstar whose story was stitched from scraps, sweat, and love.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Dollywood!
And then came the generations she couldn't have imagined. Children opening books through her imagination library, reading stories that expanded their own worlds, inspired by the very person who had learned to dream in a patched-up coat.
I've been writing songs for years for children because I have a program, my literacy program called the Imagination Library, where we give books to children from the time they're born till they're 5 years old.
Her story even reached Hollywood. The 2000 CBS movie brought the coat, the tears, and the triumph to screens across America, dramatizing a childhood that had once been just hers. Fans on social media shared their own stories of resilience, of love stitched from hardship, proving that her song wasn't just nostalgia, it was a lifeline. But what no one fully realized was that every Grammy, every cover, every child reached through a book carried with it the quiet echo of a little girl in Tennessee, proud yet vulnerable in her coat, teaching the world that true legacy isn't measured in applause, but in the hearts touched, in courage passed forward, and in the stories that refuse to be forgotten. It's easy to see the glitz and the Grammys, to count the awards and the milestones. But the true measure of her legacy are the quiet moments. A child reading their first book because of her imagination library. A teenager finding courage in the lyrics of a song sung decades ago. A mother passing down a story that teaches hope. Dolly taught us that greatness often begins in humility, heartbreak, and stitched together dreams. That patchwork coat in a little girl's cabin became a legend that the world felt. Because sometimes the smallest threads leave the biggest marks. And that's a story worth remembering.